Hello and welcome to Wellness Wednesdays. Glad you guys are with me again for a live event here on the LiveWell coaching platform. It is always a pleasure to be with you and kind of give you some tips and tools for how to live the life you've always wanted. We're super passionate about helping people get healthy and stay healthy at LiveWell. And I hope that these times that we're spending together on Wednesday are part of your routine at this point, and that just gets you in a position where you're getting the coping skills and the strategies you need to live the life that we all hope for, right? And that's our goal: free of depression and anxiety and stress and relationship problems, and kind of just moving towards the hope and joy and peace that we all want to live in. So got a good one for you today, I think. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about learned helplessness. Learned helplessness. A lot of you are familiar with that topic. I'm going to make it super applicable to your life. So you're going to see how a psychological principle that we've been studying in the field for really decades and decades, is really a part of all of our lives. I'm going to start by telling you a little story. So it goes back to a friend of mine. I have a buddy named Jason. Jason, maybe you're going to watch this video. Jason had a dog. The dog's name was Sugar. I'll never forget the first time I went to Jason's house. I go over, I've got my family, and he's like, "Hey, we've got this puppy, like 3 or 4 years old." I guess it wasn't a puppy, it's a little young dog, right? And we're going to bring her out. She can play with the kids. I thought it was a great idea, right? The kids love dogs. So let's just say that Sugar was a very active dog. Can we start there? My little girl was small, man, at this point. And I remember this Sugar was just super excited to see Bella, right? So, man, jumping all around, like tackling her. I'm like, "Oh, this is great. Yeah, Jason, this is awesome. Your dog is crazy," right? Sugar's crazy. Sugar has like an anxiety disorder, a psychotic disorder, maybe demon possessed. I don't know what's going on with Sugar, but Sugar's crazy. And, we laughed about it, kind of. And Sugar's jumping all over me, jumping all over everybody. And I learned that day that I had to kind of be careful with Sugar, right? Had to be careful going over to their house and dealing with Sugar. I'd always get ready, right? You walk in the door, you're like, "Where's Sugar? What's going on with Sugar?" Because I want to make sure I watch my blind spot, because at any point this dog is gonna be all over me like white on rice. So we go over one day, and I am talking to Jason, and the wives are talking and having a great time, and it just dawns on me. I'm like, wait, I'm kind of calm right now at Jason's house. What's the deal? Where's Sugar? And I look over, and Sugar's there, right in the dining room, just right across the hall. I'm like, what, Jason? What did you do to Sugar? Did you give Sugar like a sedative? Did you trank Sugar? Like what happened? Is Sugar depressed? Like, have you been beating Sugar? Like, what's going on with the dog? He's like, "Oh, we have Sugar on our leash." I was like, okay. And sure enough, I look over, and the dog's sitting on the ground right next to this chair. Now, the chair was, I'm trying to think of how to describe the chair. It wasn't like a super heavy dining room table. It was kind of a light chair, and they take the leash, and they had set it, like the loop of the leash, underneath one of the chair like legs, right? And that's it. Like, it's just this leash laying around underneath what amounts to the leg of a very light chair. And I said, "Dude, I don't get it. Like, what? Like, why isn't she jumping on me right now? She's clearly could pull that chair anywhere in the house she wanted to." And he's like, "Mike, it's so funny. When Sugar was just a little baby puppy, when we first got her, we would put her on our leash, and when we needed to control her, which was often, all the time, we would put this leash under the chair, and she was so little she couldn't move that chair. And we just never stopped doing it. And she's not aware right now that she has the power to pull that chair anywhere in this house. So we trick her into thinking that she's stuck. And I, first of all, was amazed. I was like, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. But then it hit me. Like, Sugar was a victim of learned helplessness. Sugar was convinced that there was no way that she was going to be able to go anywhere because she had that leash on and it was stuck under this leg of the chair. And she knew with everything that was in her, based on all the experiences she had had for years at this point, she couldn't move that chair. She was going nowhere. So she didn't even try. Isn't that crazy? And so even though, Sugar could have been in my lap, licking my face, tackling my daughter at any moment, she was convinced that there was no hope, that there was no way she could move, that there was no way that she could move forward, that there's no way she could get out of the situation that she was in. She was stuck. You see where I'm going with this? How many times have you been in a situation where you're just in learned helplessness because of real experiences that you've had over time, because of real situations that you've had in relationships, at your job, with the people that mean the most to you? I'm talking your wife, your husband, your kids, your parents, your boss. You're just convinced you're stuck. Doesn't matter what I try. Doesn't matter how hard I tug. It doesn't matter how hard I try to move forward. There's no moving my life. There's no way to get movement in this relationship. There's no way to feel different. I'm stuck. And you feel that way because, like I said, the days and weeks and months and years that you've been convinced because of these real experiences you've had that you can't do anything. How many times have you been in a situation like that? And I think we're all paralyzed by situations where we have learned that it's hopeless. We've learned that there's no way out. We've learned, man, there's no way she's going to treat me the way I deserve to be treated. There's no way that he's going to respect me and love me. There's no way that I'm going to have a voice. There's no way I'm ever going to get ahead with my boss. He'll always see me in the same way and position me the way he always has. And guys, I'm telling you that it's highly probable that you're making those decisions to metaphorically just lay on the ground in the dining room next to a chair in a situation that you just might be able to have tons of leverage with going forward. But you don't even try anymore. So I want you to take a minute, and I'm just going to pause for a second. I want you to think about some situations in your life where you feel stuck. You might even want to get your phone out. I know it's close to you if you're like me. Get your phone out, open a note, and just jot some notes down. Man, maybe here's one or two situations, one or two relationships, one or two environments that you would say, man, maybe I'm not stuck, but I feel stuck. It's immovable. So think about that for a minute. Now I'm gonna talk a little bit about learned helplessness in the context of marriage. I'm going to do that because I think that's where a lot of people are at. And I know in our clinic that we see that many, many times, is that people get stuck in relational patterns, especially with their closest relationships, where they expect the other person to act a certain way, do a certain thing, be a certain way. And because of that expectation, they never try to move the chair. They never try to get leverage. They never try to move forward. But as we do this and we talk a little bit about marriage, I want you to kind of leave some openness in your mind to say, okay, how can I relate these same skills to maybe another relationship that I'm struggling with, or another situation or environment that I'm just dealing with learned hopelessness in? Fair enough? So let's look at the metaphor of marriage here. Sometimes people can just get so frustrated by the old patterns in their relationship that you really do feel like, man, I've tried everything and there's no way to move. And researchers have found that about a third of animals or people, ironically, who encountered noise or shock that they couldn't escape from and couldn't control did not descend into learned helplessness. So that's interesting, right? So we're talking about marriage and, man, we get stuck in these patterns. And then we're looking at research and saying, man, what is it about this 1/3 of people, even though they're in a situation that literally they can't control the noise, they can't control the shock. We do these crazy things to these animals in these research studies as psychologists. It's kind of sad. But so we put them in this situation and there's this noise that's just blasting at them, or a shock. It doesn't matter what they do. They can't get away from it. Yet 1/3 of the people don't get hopeless in that. What we found is that the key to being able to be insulated from learned hopelessness is a quality we call optimism. Optimism is the difference between those that have like kind of an all is lost mentality versus those people that have a this too shall pass mentality. And so what does it take to maintain hope in the face of a very difficult relationship, a very difficult marital situation? Optimism. And it's the belief that you can handle whatever situation you find yourself in, and that stressor that you're currently experiencing, whatever that they're presenting to you in the marriage, is manageable. It's just a mindset. Isn't that crazy? So we've done all the studies and we know that 2/3 of people and animals they just get stuck. 1/3 of people, even when they're in a situation that would suggest you can't get out of this. Like, the reality is that the noise is not going to go off, or that you're not going to stop getting shocked no matter what you do. They still sort of leave those experiments with this belief that, man, I've got some optimism about my life. I've got some optimism about my ability to control my environment. And if you want to engage optimism instead of learned hopelessness, you really have to focus on the battleground of your mind, and you have to monitor your negative thoughts. That's the biggest piece in all of this, is that you have to get control of your mindset. Metaphorically, if you're in learned helplessness and you're convinced the relationship is never going to change, he's always going to do this, she's always going to treat me like this, he's always going to be disrespectful, she's never going to be affectionate. If you believe that, you're essentially just yielding to the hopelessness of the situation. Your job is to challenge that negative mindset with the mindset of truth. The truth is, you don't know that that's true. You don't know that that's accurate. You don't know that you're not going to be able to shift and mold that person's behavior. You don't know that your words aren't going to matter. Yeah, but Mike, you don't understand. I've been dealing with this for a decade. We've been married 10 years. I've been dealing with this for for 27 years. He's been treating me like this since the day we started dating. She's been doing, on our honeymoon, she did this. I know. I get it. There were moments where it was real. There were moments where you were kind of at the mercy of your spouse's unmanageable anger or difficult family life growing up or stress on their job. There were moments where, you were stuck as a couple, but I'm telling you, the key here is to begin to get a hold of your thought patterns, to get a hold of your mindset and say, okay, I've got to challenge the thought that I'm stuck. And I've got to come against that with what amounts to the reality of my situation. And the reality of my situation is there's always hope. There's always hope that people will change. There's always hope that we can change. And we've all grown. You have to remember that. Sugar was all grown up. She didn't even know it. You're all grown up. You've grown up in this marriage. You guys have both changed. There's nothing to suggest that if you put your mind to it and you start to work at it, that you can't make some shifts and some changes. Yeah, but we've been dealing with this for 10 years. I know you're both different people now than you were 10 years ago. And hope starts when you begin to believe the best about your spouse. That's one of the biggest shifts that you can make in a relationship, in a marriage, is to shift from assuming the worst to believing the best. Does that make sense? You assume the worst about your spouse, their intentions, about what they're going to do next, about what they're going to say next, about how they're going to treat you. You almost always create your reality. There's a researcher out in Washington. His name is John Gottman. John Gottman has the Relationship Lab. He can predict divorce with, I think it's like 78% certainty after watching a couple interact for 15 minutes. It's kind of crazy. They've done the studies for decades, right? So what they do is they bring these couples in and they say they're there for a research study. What they don't tell them is that the research study is actually them waiting in the waiting room. They think they're waiting to go into the research study. The research is actually the waiting room and how they interact and how they treat each other. And so they've got teams of people behind this one-way mirror, and they literally track every word that's said, every behavior that's emitted by this couple. And as John Gottman and his team watch these couples interact, they can predict divorce with like 78% certainty after watching them for 15 minutes. One of the things that they've said that's associated with a strong likelihood of getting divorced is assuming the worst. So that hopeless mindset, that learned hopelessness tells you it's never going to get better. You're never going to change. You're never going to be a different person. You're always going to treat me like that. You assume the worst. This is especially true when your experience doesn't meet your expectations. So if you have think about it, you've got experience and you've got expectation, right? And when your experience meets your expectation, you're fine. But when if I'm expecting something and then I experience something different, I expect someone in this situation to be kind. But my experience is you're being a jerk, or you're being snarky, you're being critical, or you're being distant. That's when we have to say, are we going to assume the worst, or are we going to believe the best? In the moments that you're disappointed, in the moments that you feel stuck, in the moments that you feel like, oh, here we go again. I can't believe we're back here. The biggest mind shift that will allow you to engage optimism, like that 1/3 of people, is say, I'm going to fight to believe the best about my spouse. That is super tough, guys. If you have decades of getting a certain behavior from your spouse, it's so hard to say, I'm not going to assume I know what you're going to say next. I'm not going to assume the worst. I'm not going to assume I know how you're going to react. I'm going to believe the best about you, the best about your intentions, the best about your heart for me in our marriage. Yeah, but Mike, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like when you've been getting this toxic behavior for decades. Of course I know what it's like. I'm married, right? I'm a human. I do that to my wife all the time. She does that to me all the time. That's called life. By the way, it's not just marriage. That's why I said this generalizes to everything. Yeah, I know what my boss is going to say. I know how he's going to treat me. I know what this employee is going to say. I know her character or his character. No, you don't. Learned helplessness says there's nothing you can do to shift the relational dynamic. Optimism says, you know what? I'm going to believe the best. I'm going to approach this situation with grace. And I'm going to do my part to be the healthiest version of myself I can be. And I promise you, especially in entrenched patterns of relationships with people that you've been in relationships with for years, if you can begin to shift this and begin to say, okay, I'm going to believe the best. I don't care what you say or do. I'm going to believe the best about you. It makes an incredible difference. What Gottman finds in that research lab is even when the entire team is watching the couple interact and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he just said that. So objectively, it's like, that was actually mean. Like what she said was actually super critical. Everybody's like, oh, this is bad. Even when the couple skews towards denial and looks beyond like things that are obviously a slight and says, you know what, I'm still going to treat you with respect. I don't care how you treat me. I'm going to treat you with respect. You're having a bad day. You're stressed out. You're overwhelmed. You're tired. You're hungry. You're hangry. Whatever it is. I know who you really are. I know your heart for me, and I'm going to trust. I'm going to believe the best about you. Guys, it makes an incredible difference. So that's the mindset shift that has to happen in our relationships for us to not feel stuck anymore. Are we going to lay by the dining room table with our leash underneath a chair that we can pull anywhere in the house? Are we going to continue to just feel like we can't exert any control over this situation that years ago really had us? Or are we going to say, I'm not going to interact with you in this way any longer. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to trust the process. I'm going to know that if I treat you with grace and mercy and believe the best about you, that we have a chance of moving away from this negative, toxic pattern. And so that's where our faith really starts to come in. And because, a lot of what we're talking about is grace, right? A lot of what we're talking about is I'm not going to give you what you deserve. Remember that we crave transactional relationships. I'm in a transactional relationship with my barista at Starbucks, right? So if I go to Starbucks, I give them $10, $18, whatever. I get one coffee, right? It's an expensive coffee at Starbucks, isn't it? So I'm going to give them my money and I'm going to get my coffee. It's a transaction. And if I give them my money and I don't get my coffee, I'm mad, right? Because I want to get what I deserve. And guess what? It goes the opposite way as well. If I just go up to the counter and just start taking copies that they lay up there, they call out names, and half the time people don't even hear their name. I can walk up and get that copy. If they catch me doing that, they're going to get mad, right? Why? Because I didn't pay for my coffee. They didn't get what they deserved. We crave transactional relationships. We crave relationships where I get what I deserve. I treated you with kindness. I deserve kindness back. I treated you with respect. I deserve respect back. And when we get disappointed like that, that's where that toxic belief begins to sort of infiltrate our mind, and we assume the worst. We assume the worst. We assume the worst. A transactional relationship where we get what we deserve will never happen. You will never be able to give people what they deserve, especially in close relationships. If your spouse has disrespected you, there have been some people that are watching this right now. Man, your spouse has done unthinkable things, affairs and spent money and all the things, right? You'll never be able to repay them enough to where you finally feel like, okay, I've finally given you enough vitriol or anger or condescending talk, or to where I finally feel like now you got what you deserve from me, so we're back on par. You'll never give people what they deserve. It'll never feel even. And it doesn't matter if it's not like a shocking thing like an affair. And I'm talking about just the little everyday things. There's some of you that feel so hurt by how your spouse has treated you for so many years that you just don't feel like you can ever trust them again. There's some people that are so hurt by your kids, man. Like, I don't know that I can. How do they lie like that? There's some of you that you go to work and you're like, I'm never going to get, you're so hurt because you're like, I'm never going to get ahead. I'm never going to get ahead. And so there's nothing you can do that would ever sort of allow you to feel like, man, I gave them what they deserve, so we're now on even par. The only answer to these relationships, the only path to hope, the only path out of feeling stuck and hopeless is to engage in something other than a transactional relationship. And I call it a grace-filled relationship. And a grace-filled relationship is a relationship that says, I am not going to give you what you deserve. I'm going to give you grace and mercy whenever I can. I'm going to believe the best about you whenever I can. Guess who treats you like that? God. I mean, isn't that the incredible, beautiful part about the spiritual relationship with your Creator? Is we know one thing. We know that God gives us grace. When we run the other direction and when we do everything imaginable to do the opposite of what we know God has called us to do. And those that you have your list and I have mine, right? We could make a laundry list of here's all the things that, man, I did. I turned my back here and I made a choice just that was totally against God's heart for me. And this and that, and I did this. And 10 years ago, we all have a list. Guess what God's response to that has been? It's grace upon grace upon grace upon grace. As far as the east is from the west, that's how far he's removed your transgressions from you. There's a scripture that says, white as snow, though my sins were as scarlet. That's our template, guys. That's the template for the grace-filled relationship, is to say, I'm not going to give you what you deserve. I'm not going to wait until I feel like I've given you the business long enough to where, or you've finally treated me the way I want to be treated, so now I'm going to be kind to you. You can't do your relationships like that and have them feel satisfying and fulfilling. The only path here is for you to say, I'm just going to respond to the grace that God has given me with grace for other people. I'm going to respond to the grace that God has given me with grace for other people. Being offended is a choice. Offense is inevitable. Being offended is a choice. We've got to make the choice to say, I'm going to choose to give grace to the people, especially the people that are closest to me. So that goes for your spouse. That goes for your kids. That goes for your relationship with your parents. That goes for your team at work. That goes for the boss that, you don't understand how or why he or she says and does what they do. You've got to respond with grace. But here's the beauty of this, right? If you can respond in grace, that builds that narrative. I believe the best. That people can do something objectively, just like Gottman's lab. People would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe your boss talked to you like that. I can't believe your wife said that. He's having a bad day. He's stressed out. He's overwhelmed. She's she's been through a lot. She's really tired. Even if it's skewed in the direction of denial, believe the best. Believe the best. Believe the best. It will transform your relationships, and it will put you in a situation where you're pursuing your life with a completely different mindset, with a mindset of optimism. To say, I think this can get better. I think there's hope for me. I think there's hope for us. And I'll tell you, you'll be surprised by what can happen if you can get a hold of this. Gary Smalley is a prolific writer in marriage. He wrote for years and years. He passed away now. But he wrote a book called The Power of One. And the power of one was essentially the idea that, man, if one person in a relationship begins to get a hold of this grace-filled, believe the best, optimistic perspective, it can change a whole system. It can change your marriage. It could change the team at your workplace. You can change the team at your workplace if you lead with grace. I can't believe they said that. I can't believe you did. How? Lead with grace. Believe the best. Now, does that mean that you don't draw boundaries appropriately? Of course not. There's moments where you have to draw boundaries. And I'm not saying to let people walk all over you. And, if your spouse is being rude and unkind, you have to draw a boundary and say, hey, I'm not having this conversation if you're screaming, right? Don't point in my face. Don't yell and scream. And I'm going to walk away for 10 minutes and I'll be back. And if you can talk like an adult, let's have the conversation, right? You have to draw boundaries sometimes. I get that. How do you draw them? How do you draw boundaries in a way that's effective? I'll tell you how you do it, with a ton of warmth. You speak the truth in love, and you say, I'm going to be responsible for my behavior. I don't care how other people treat me. I'm responsible for me. And my job is to, with consistency in a chronic way, always treat people with grace. You speak the truth. You don't lie, you don't placate, you don't people please. You speak the truth in love. Guys, if you can get a hold of this concept, you're going to put yourself in a position where you see the relationships that you've been struggling with for years begin to shift, because there is a power in one person to change a relationship and to change a system. The power of one. Got to believe that. You've got to make that shift in your mindset. But trust me, if you do, you're going to find that you're not like sugar, that you're not laying in the dining room when life's going on around you, just thinking that you're stuck and there's no way to move, this immovable object. Approach with grace. Believe the best in people. Be optimistic. Have hope. And know, as you engage in that new mindset, in all likelihood, you're going to change everyone around you. All right, this was good. Super glad you guys were here with me today. I want to remind everybody, if you're not signed up for the subscription on the LiveWell coaching platform, you got to go there and sign up. That's how you'll get access to these live events for, every week we do 3 of them. We'll have all the community. We have these challenges going. Just please do yourself a favor. Tell your friends. Post it on your Facebook and your Instagram and your Twitter and TikTok. You guys on TikTok? I just got on TikTok. They're about to shut it down. So I don't know. I might be one of the last joiners. I'm not an early adapter there. I'm a late adapter. But just put it on your social media and allow yourself to say, okay, let me get the word out about LiveWell coaching so that everybody has access to this information and we can all get healthy and stay healthy together. All right. Hope you guys have a great week.